GeorgeNotFound is not who he seems. Let me rephrase that. GeorgeNotFound, the character on the YouTuber Dream's family-friendly TVY7 no drugs allowed Minecraft server, is not who he seems. Goggy isn't about to get a baseless expose video or anything. This is all just a theory. I, of course, have no way of knowing what direction the plot will end up going. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. This video also contains spoilers for basically everything currently happening in the SMP, so this is your final chance to click off before I start talking about that. Finally, if you happen to enjoy the video, consider subscribing. Or don't, I don't really care. No, that's a lie, I do care. Subscribe or else. George has from the beginning been Dream's right-hand man, always following what our favorite green blob willed, hardly showing any opposition to what Dream said, merely blindly following his orders until joining El Rapids. George has slept through L'Manberg's election despite being Quackity's running mate, and built a house completely unaware of the siege on Manberg and Jschlatt until it was almost over, showing a lack of actually caring and being naive to almost all events, just being Dream's yes man. But what if I told you that this is the furthest thing from the truth, and that GeorgeNotFound is one of the most scheming characters on the entire SMP, hiding under our noses this whole time? It struck me while I was watching some old VODs from the very beginning of the SMP. George was acting very different than he does now, being significantly more aware, building a significant portion of the community house, and going against Dream frequently. You could chalk this all up to him not playing a character on the SMP yet, and just being himself, playing Minecraft, since the role-playing elements weren't introduced yet. But I believe that he's putting on an act later on and pretending to be more clueless than he actually is to be able to gain power. And if it was just because he wasn't playing a character yet, that doesn't explain his sudden betrayal of the Dream SMP to join El Rapids, or how, despite being informed, somehow not being aware of the siege on Manberg. Let's take a look at how George is always on the side of whoever can benefit him most at any given time. He stayed loyal to Dream, but when he had his kingship revoked by Dream, he suddenly out of nowhere switched sides to El Rapids, who were planning to overthrow Eret and Dream. But when that turned out to lead to no usurping of the throne, George started siding with Dream again, since he had the power to give George power. And right when Dream is thrown into prison, George seems apathetic and doesn't bother to visit, even though Dream wanted him to, as revealed on BadBoyHalo's stream.
Who do you want to come and visit you? I'll try and get them to come and visit you. Anyone in particular you really want to see? I'll talk to them.
I want George and Sapnap to visit me.
This seems really out of character for who would seem to be Dream's most loyal follower on the whole SMP. This would seem to suggest that George isn't as naive or blind as he seems. Unless we're talking colorblind. George, I'm so sorry, please give me clout. But this would explain why George was clearly informed of the election and chose not to go and was sleeping. I think he actually slept through it in real life, but that's besides the point. It's part of the lore now. He saw that any outcome would be damaging to his power on the server if he was present. If Wilbur won, he would lose basically all of his power and be dragged down by a failed political campaign. If Jschlatt won, he'd be treated the same way as Quackity was by Jschlatt, except with even less power. If Quackity won, it would have been the same outcome as Jschlatt winning because of the vote pooling. And if Fundy won, I don't actually think there was a script even planned for this scenario. Prove me wrong though. I'm talking to you, Wilbur, who's probably not watching this video. George was also informed of the siege on Manberg and was replying to his chat showing he was aware. This is incredibly odd for him to then brush it off without a second thought. Even if he wasn't just putting on an act and playing dumb, this always rubbed me the wrong way, and it felt very unnatural to the plot for him to know but not even try and investigate, but instead build his house and show up only to claim he was there the whole time. He knew he'd be putting himself at risk to go, and so he chose to fall back for the time being to build a house until he had to go there and claim his kingship. At a point, George claimed he didn't care for the role of king when it was revoked, which, according to this theory, we can assume would be him trying to cover up his plan to not appear too suspicious. One other piece of evidence for this theory is that near the beginning of the server, George burnt down Ponk's first lemon tree as revenge for Ponk griefing his base. Without this theory, it seems out of character for George to both seek out revenge and also go against Dream, who didn't want any conflict or fighting. That is, it would be out of character unless George was actually choosing his battles very wisely and trying to set a precedent for not touching his home, which likely would have evidence of his true nature hidden somewhere in there. At some point post-election, George moved in with Awesamedude, because he thought he was too weak to take part in current conflicts, or That's what he said. I believe this was all an elaborate ruse. He knew Pugtopia was about to attack the festival somehow and had to cover up how much he was aware of, or that he was aware at all. And so I believe he really went to live with Sam to save himself, and by extension throw every other person in Manburg under the bus for the sake of removing himself from the volatile situation because it had no opportunity to grant him any noticeable power. When Tommy and Ranboo burnt down George's house, George fixed the damages quickly, but this was the basis for Tommy getting exiled, something which George seemed to be uninvolved in and mostly just be something Dream was using to further his own agenda of banishing Tommy. But it's likely George knew Dream would do this, and so he stepped back as to not get involved in another conflict and save himself from any danger at all.
If only he could do that when he gets killed like 10 times in every manhunt.
George's plans to stay out of danger and act as a puppet master behind the scenes worked spectacularly, considering he's yet to have a single canon death. Unless you count Techno's assassination attempt, but the Dream SMP wiki doesn't, so neither will I. Another piece of evidence of a deeper understanding of his surroundings than he lets on comes in George's most recent stream at the time of writing this. He goes around robbing different bases to be able to make iron armor after not being on in a while, showing he's able to infiltrate and rob multiple members of the server with no remorse. Him not being on in a while and missing the Dis conflict and Doomsday of L'Manberg seems deliberate, almost as though he knew what was going to happen and distanced himself from the SMP for his own safety, like possibly Dream told him. Now that we've gone over the evidence, I feel the need to specify. Do I think this was a planned part of the lore to make George a secret evil mastermind? Not at all. Everything in this video is admittedly a reach and basically just some fan fiction with minimal basing in canon events. Everything in this video is probably explained because George isn't a fan of doing the scripted parts of the SMP, and so he hasn't spent that much time on characterization. And so there's of course going to be more inconsistencies than say Ranboo, who I'm willing to bet good money on him having a Google Doc with pages upon pages of character lore. But still, it's always fun to theorize even if this probably isn't the case. That is, unless Dream's watching this video and feels like using this idea, in which case you are completely allowed to.
And also please give me all of your clout and follow me on Twitter. Thanks.
I really hope you enjoyed the video. I spent a lot of time putting it together, and so if you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing or following me on Twitch. It's a simple click of your mouse, and if you don't do it, I'll chop your kneecaps off. Goodbye. See you later. Goodbye. Bye-bye. See you later. Goodbye. Get out. Goodbye. Leave.